Majority Leader Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the Senate proceed out of order to take up Senate Bill 188.
That is a proper motion. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 188? We will be in a brief senatorial 5. You good, Esther?
Appropriations report.
Committee will come back to order. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 188?
Senate Bill 188 by Senators Coleman and Rodriguez and Representatives McCoskey and Duran concerning the payment of the expenses of the Legislative Department.
Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 188 in the committee report.
To the committee report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In the committee, there was a technical amendment brought to us by Director Castle. It cut 0.3 FTE that was included in an error for Legislative Council staff. We ask for an aye vote on the committee report.
Any further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the question before the body is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Members, thank you for being here to hear this bill for the legislative appropriations. This bill provides funding for all of our staff in the Legislative Council Department, OLLS, Audit, and JBC, and it also provides conversation regarding our legislative cash fund. It's a conversation we've had in depth in executive committee as well as with Ledge Council for a time and has had support, and we look forward to the debate around the legislative appropriations budget.
Senator Kirkmire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I don't rise in opposition to the entire budget. We have to have a legislative branch budget. We've got to get it done before we can finish up the long bill. That's the way it works. But I have great concerns about what we're doing with regard to our budget in the legislative branch. I think everyone knows, certainly if you don't know by now, and I'm just going to give everybody a heads up for those of you who maybe aren't in the room, that I do have at least 4 amendments, and I'm going to ask for a division on every amendment. Because I think this is important that you're in the room and that you hear this discussion when it comes to our budget. We are on an unsustainable path. The size and the cost of our budget has exceeded what is reasonable. And it's led to us now at the Joint Budget Committee that we can only do those things that we need to do, that are necessary to do. The must-haves. That's where we're at. Not the nice-to-haves, but the must-haves. I imagine for all of us, maybe that's a little bit different. But over the course of the last 6 years, the General Assembly and the Governor have frequently missed the mark on what is really needed. And we have overspent dramatically. In fact, I would say at this point, we're in a crisis of priorities. If you choose to say everything is a priority and then it must be funded, you have no priorities. I've been very clear on what my priorities are. They're about funding education, K-12 through post-secondary. It's about funding our healthcare system because, quite frankly, it's broken. In the last 6 years, when I first got here, all I heard was the hospitals are making too much money. Well, they fixed that problem. Our system is broken. We have 25 counties that have a maternal health care desert in the state of Colorado. In the governor's budget request, he cut funding to neglected and abused kids. He didn't put in enough funding for child care for low-income families. They cut funding to early intervention resources for children with heartbreaking disabilities. And yesterday, we were doing healthcare policy and finance budget, which is where Medicaid is. The governor had a request to cut Medicaid funding, the providers, by approximately $13 million of general fund money, which equated to $57 million of total funds. Now, that's not the feds. I've been hearing, and I'm thinking a lot of folks have been hearing over the course of the last few weeks, since Donald Trump became president, and since there was a vote a couple weeks ago, that the feds are cutting, Donald Trump and the Republicans are cutting Medicaid. Shocking. In Colorado, it's in the governor's budget request to cut Medicaid provider rates by $57 million, $13 million of general fund. One of my other priorities is child welfare. We have to take care of the most vulnerable. You know, I grew up in a very poor situation. The only reason we had meat on the table and milk in our glasses is because we had a dairy farm. Other than that, it was pretty much potatoes. We were always taught that you're supposed to take care of those that are less fortunate than you. And no matter how poor you are, there's always someone less fortunate than you. We had 11 people around the dinner table. It included my grandmother, my great uncle, my 6 siblings, my parents, and myself. So yesterday, I gave a big lecture. Yeah, a Republican giving a lecture about how we should not be cutting Medicaid. $13 million general fund, $57 million total funds. I've been giving the lecture how we should not be cutting core services to neglected and abused kids. Again, in the governor's budget request. Our budget issue is not because of Tabor. It's quite frankly from year over year overspending, excessive spending, burdening more people with fees and more taxes, and increasing government beyond what we can afford. We need to stop the excessive spending. And that starts with our budget. This is where you have the opportunity to make that difference, to say, yes, this is my priorities. And I'm hoping today that you pick kids, that you pick families over the increases that are in our legislative budget that are not necessary. So you should have gotten a copy of the legislative budget. It looks like this. Should have been on your desk. So for the past, I don't know, however many months it's been since the November, since the Joint Budget Committee has come back into session, I've been telling departments, other branches, other elected officials that they need to come in with cuts. They need to decrease their general fund spending. That's what we're talking about here when we talk about $1 billion in the hole. That we need to cut approximately $1 billion out of our general fund dollars. $1 billion. So what do we have in the legislative department? Their general fund, our general fund. This is us. our general fund appropriations increase by 0.9%, essentially 1%. No reduction. There is no reduction here. We're increasing by 0.9%. And over the course of the last 5 years, we have been, from this appropriation, we have been reverting approximately about $5 million on average year over year for the last 5 years. Yes, that's it. And you can go look on page 9. That's where the legislative budget kind of a summary is. It is the summary in that table that shows you that we're 0.9% increase in general fund. But again, year over year for the last 5 years, we have been reverting. We have been rolling over about $5 million a year of our general fund appropriation into a cash fund. And yet at the same time, instead of reducing our general fund appropriation, coming in with the budget request that says, hey, we're going to reduce our general fund appropriation, we just keep saying, no, give us that full appropriation. We're not spending approximately $5 million a year for the last 5 years, but just give us that appropriation. Because then we put it in a cash fund. That is all general fund money. The cash fund that you see in our legislative budget is not from a fee. It is general fund money. And so we've been rolling over about $5 million a year for the last 5 years, and it goes on, it goes back. We've been rolling money over since 2012 to the tune of about $54 million that has gone into a fund that the executive committee comes back and says, well, here's where we think we should spend that money. But again, we've been telling other departments, you have to decrease. You've heard me say this several times. Everyone has to decrease. Everything is on the table. Right now, yesterday, we were talking about cutting Medicaid to the poorest of the poor in our state. Do you know what 138% of the federal poverty level is? It's approximately $44,367 income for a family of 4. So if you make less as a family of 4, $44,367, you are eligible for Medicaid. That's basically what our salary is. But think of family of 4, and that's your only income, and it's less than $45,000, you're eligible for Medicaid. And yesterday, we had a request from the governor to cut it, to cut Medicaid providers, to cut the rate for things like maternity care, maternal health care, anesthesia, durable medical equipment. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, I want you to think about babies that are born with disabilities and they can't breathe. They can't leave the hospital until they get a ventilation machine. We're talking about cutting them by nearly 5%. That's what was in the governor's request. Yet here we are in our legislative budget saying, God, don't cut us. Shouldn't be us. I mean, we've got such important work to do. It can't just be us. Even knowing that we are reverting, last year we reverted $5.5 million into a fund to be spent on things like furniture. And we're going to hear, well, you know, it's for capital renovation. And it's extremely important that we get all of our legislators into one building, and we're doing all these changes, and we need this money. So apparently we don't need it for our appropriation for the OLLS or for the Legislative Council or for the State Auditor's Office or even for JBC staff. We need it for other things like capital renovation. Well, before they go too far down that argument, I'll find my sheet here. We have this other fund that we appropriate dollars to. It's called the Capital Complex Renovation Cash Fund. We don't need, funny thing, here it is. We don't need to take money from our branch to put money into capital renovations because the JBC appropriates funds to the Capital Complex Renovation Cash Fund. General funds, but we appropriate them there. And we're appropriating, we've had prior appropriations up to $78 million. And in this budget year, we're appropriating $16 million. So we don't need to be over appropriating into the legislative branch budget by $5.5 million or $5 million every year. We don't need to be doing that. When we do that, when we over appropriate into the legislative branch and then we roll that into another fund and then it just gets spent, we lose all transparency. We lose transparency of where those dollars are being spent. How much is it truly costing us to renovate the Capitol? And I'm not saying we shouldn't renovate the Capitol, and I'm not saying that we don't want all of the legislators over here. But what I am saying is we need to have priorities. We appropriate as a joint budget committee, and in our long bill, in our budget, we appropriate to the capital renovations, capital complex renovation plan. And people are supposed to plan. We have a whole committee that gets to plan on what we're going to do with those funds. And they're supposed to come up with budgets, and we're supposed to be responsible, everybody. So I have an amendment, and I hope you're all
There's an
going
amendment
to...
at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L007?
Amendment L007, amend printed bill, page 2, line 2, strike.
Senator Kirkmire,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L007.
to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. L007 gets to the heart of this. It essentially says that, and there's a lot of numbers here because, well, we've been reverting a lot of money to a cash fund. So what this says is that we would reduce our appropriation by $3.5 million. So we would reduce our budgeted amount by $3.5 million, and that would be appropriated by percentages of reversions in each of our offices, whatever that percentage is. But it's $3.5 million, which equates to about 5% of our $73.4 million budget that we have. And it actually doesn't really become 5% because the budget is overspending by 1%. So it's really about a 4% reduction at this point. A 4% reduction that we haven't been using, that we've been reverting into a cash fund, that lacks transparency. Unless you go digging, you don't know about what goes into the cash fund or what that cash fund is spent on. Unless we go digging, unless we get more of an explanation on what our legislative budget is going for. So I'm asking the legislative branch, I'm asking all of us to do what we're asking the other two branches to do, the other elected officials in their budgets to do, and that's to decrease your general fund, ongoing general fund expenditures. Now, quite frankly, I would have liked to have done more, but I don't think you would have agreed to it. But $3.5 million does not hurt us. It doesn't. 3.5 million when we've been reverting 5.5 last year, 6.43 the year before. This doesn't hurt us. We're not spending this money on things that we're saying we absolutely have to run the legislative branch. It's additional money. We shouldn't be over appropriating. especially in a year when we're $1 billion in the hole. So I am asking for an aye vote on 007. Let's be responsible.
Senator Pelton to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I feel like we need to set the example. When we're asking other people to cut their budget, we need to do the same. In 2021, when we were doing the budget for 2021 in Logan County, I took a pay cut because I could not look at those people in the face that their businesses were closed for 4 or 5 months out of the year and say, oh, you have to pay your full property tax and I'm going to take my increase. No, I wanted to set the example of I refused my increase and I was getting paid the exact same amount I did the year before. It's the same with this. We need to set the example. We need to be leaders and say, we're going to cut $3.5 million out of our budget. That's what we need to do. I'd like to go back to what the good senator from Weld County was talking about with child welfare. In 2019, in Logan County alone, it was, we overspent our budget over $1.5 million for child welfare. You know why? 68 kids were taken from their home due to methamphetamines. 68 kids, just in one county, in Logan County. These are priorities that we need to set for the state. We're going to cut our budget so places like Logan County can pay for their kids that have to be placed somewhere. I'm just saying that we need to set the example. We have got to do it right here, right now. $3.5 million isn't that big a cut, but it's enough. It's what we can agree on as a body. I ask for an aye vote on L007.
Senator Bright to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I stand in support of Amendment L007. I think it's tough for us to fund new furniture in our offices while lunch for our kids is in question. Today's Denver Post, Tuesday, March 11, 2025, front page, free school meals program once again on shaky ground.
Hey, Paul.
I have a real hard time reading that and voting in favor of new furniture for an office that is going to be constructed for me. I'm not a career politician. I'm a husband, father, businessman, balanced budgets, made tough calls, and I always put kids and families first. That's why I ran for this seat, to fight for affordability, to cut waste, and to make Colorado a place where families can thrive. And I can't in good conscience continue without amending this to trim out these administrative costs inside of this bill. So I would encourage a yes vote on L007.
Senator Frizzell to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here to speak in support of Amendment L007. I've talked about my local government experience, and when I ran the assessor's office in Douglas County for many years, we had up years and down years. We had to tighten our belts. Sometimes we had to freeze hiring staff. Sometimes we didn't. And every expenditure had to be justified, because that's responsible. That is responsible governance. That's being transparent to the people that you work for. It's about being accountable to the people who pay your salary. I think that this amendment, I appreciate the good senator from Brighton's comment that it would be nice to cut more than $3.5 million, that represents a fairly small cut compared to what is actually really needed. But it's a reasonable request. It's very reasonable because we haven't been using these funds year over year over year. By decreasing the ongoing general fund expenditure, that will free up money to, we talked about lunch programs for kids, but I think that one thing that I've been really concerned about is the reduction in dollars for early intervention. I have 2 kiddos that live across the street from me with special needs, and I've watched them grow up. And early intervention with special needs children is so incredibly important. It sets the stage for a life. But yet that's on the chopping block here. How can we in good conscience, we here in this chamber, how can we in good conscience not prioritize them over ourselves? I want to thank the good senator from Brighton because you know what? Regardless of where you sit in this room, this attention to detail, this looking for any dollar that we can save is incredibly important to our efforts. It's incredibly important to our efforts today. It's important to our efforts over the next several weeks. As we get the long bill before us, it's incredibly important that we have that level of detail, and I'm very grateful. This amendment is about priorities. I know where my priorities are. Let's all dig deep and make sure that we understand what our priorities are as we vote. Please join me in voting yes on this amendment.
Senator Liston, to the amendment.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of Amendment L007. I too sit on the Appropriations Committee and heard all of this just this past Friday morning, and like the good senator from Sterling was saying, is that all of us, we're leaders in our districts, and we lead by example. And what the good senator from Weld County is proposing is that we have to, and quite frankly, to her credit, she's been saying this for not just weeks but months. We're in a very difficult budget situation. It shouldn't come as any surprise to any of us that we're going to have to make some tough cuts. And if we're expecting cuts in other areas, then we lead by example. So to have a modest cut of 5%, or really 4%, I think is what she's talking about, surely in our own personal budgets, in our own family budgets, when things get a little tight, we can all find a place that, maybe we just don't go on a vacation for as long, or we don't go out to dinner as much. And, we can find 4% very easily. And in consideration, I think this will be brought up later, there is a legislative fund that is sitting there, and I think the good senator has made mention of this, that we've over appropriated in the past to the tune of anywhere from $3 to $6 million a year. So we're sitting on this fund of some $22 million, which is just sitting there. that's used for special projects or special events or special this or special that. So what I heard on Friday in the Appropriations Committee, in light of the fact, and if it hasn't been brought up, it will, that there's a special allocation of approximately $4 million for furniture for the legislative staff or the legislature. Surely that can be that can be addressed. So, you know, we're not asking for a huge cut or a huge sacrifice of 10 or 15%. We're asking for a modest 3.5% to 4%. So let's show the people of Colorado that we can lead by example and that we can tighten our belts by a very modest 3.5%, 4%. Let's show true leadership. I urge and I vote for Amendment L007. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Catlin to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I'm here at the well in order to talk about some things that are happening in my district. I'm getting a lot of calls from people wanting to know about the budget. They're wanting to know, well, are they going to cut my part? What about our Medicaid? I've got people to hear today from our clinics, the FQAs, private clinics. They're here. And they're talking to us talking to me about Medicaid, about keeping those clinics open and doing the things that we as a government need to do. They're not just here to keep their checks coming in, but when we hear that we're going to cut $13 million from what we are paying people, or overall $57 million, I think that's right. Hey, that reverberates out there in those mountain peaks, believe me, because it puts fear in people. And what I'm trying to tell these folks in as genuine way as I can is, listen, we're all going to have to take some cuts. Before it's all done, there will be cuts across the board. They're starting to understand that. But as their senator, it does not work for me to be able to say, well, we're going to cut what you're getting in your clinic and or at your school or along the highway or wherever those cuts are going to come. But by the way, we're going to get new furniture. You know, that's really not going to sell well out there in the country. And I know you all know that. Every one of us is aware how that looks, what it would say, that kind of thing. But the point I'm trying to make is that if I can say to my constituents, hey, we turned away the new furniture because we know it's going to get harder, then it makes it easier for you and I to say to those constituents, this is coming. Here's an example. Is it a big enough example? Probably not. But it is an example of people saying, I'll do this for the benefit of my state or for the benefit of my community. You know, this is not going to be just about money. It's going to end up being about what do we do to help our neighbors get through a budget shortfall that we probably knew was coming. Well, I'm not certain what we're all going to do, but I know that out in the country, a lot of times what you do is trade eggs for milk. I'm not suggesting we trade, but those are the kind of things that people have done in the past. And as leaders of the community, as leaders of the state, you know, I had a young boy come to my office, and he said, "How many people are there in the state of Colorado?" And I said, "I don't know, probably about 5 million." Think I'm about right? Try 6, oh. And he looked at me and he said, "You know, there's 6 million people, 6 million people in the state of Colorado, but there's only 35 senators." And you know, that struck me because a young man was aware of how few there are of us and what kind of decisions we have to make for his benefit, for his mom's benefit, for the community he lives in. This is one of those decisions that I'm asking us to make. Leading by example is leading. Leading by statements is making a speech. We have to take a movement of some sort. We have to make a move towards what can we do, and this is one of those votes that we can do. We can vote for this amendment and say to the people at home, we understand. It is going to be tough. This is not a great sacrifice on our part. My office is across the street. It's got a full office of furniture. I don't see any problem with us in my office helping to move that office furniture to the new office that I'm supposed to get. I don't know if it's possible to say, well, we're not even going to move, we'll just stay where we're at. I think that train's already left the station. But the point is, the furniture that's in that office is good furniture. It has, and I'm not embarrassed by it at all. I'm proud of it. In fact, I like it when people come to my office because I show them what we are doing, what we have done, and you know, it's a senatorial office today. This is an action that you and I can take today that says to the state of Colorado, you are important to us. You are more important than me having a new seat in a new office place. You know, my family has done this very thing. I've said to my kids, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to get that new thing that you were wanting. And when they're little, they ask, why is that? Why, Dad? And they got tears in their voice. And you say, because we just don't have the money. That's hard for little ones to understand. But it will be harder for adults to understand if we ask them to make a cut and we can't or we won't. I once asked my dad something about money. He said, Mark, it takes a bigger man to say I can't afford that than it is to put yourself at risk of trying to borrow the money and make it happen. You know, those words are ringing in the back of my mind today because he's been gone for a while now. But it takes a bigger man, it takes a bigger person to say, I cannot afford this, than it is to put my family or my state at risk of going ahead and spending the money when we don't know where the rest of it's going to come from. Today I'm asking you to vote yes on this amendment and to show leadership to the state of Colorado for the times that are coming. And you and I both know those times are coming. Please vote yes.
Senator Carson, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to support the amendment here from the good senator from Greeley. I think she knows her budget numbers and has proposed what I think is a very reasonable reduction for us to have this year in the state of Colorado in our legislative budget. This is my first year here, being new around here, and I've been hearing ever since I got here a couple of months ago, we're going to have to cut $1 billion, $1.2 billion from the general fund. We don't know how much it's going to be. We're also looking at potential cutbacks from the federal government coming down our way. That could clearly affect the Colorado state budget. So we've got to be prepared for all of these things. And I get the sense, just being here, that we're kind of putting off the inevitable here, ignoring the reality of what's going to hit us in April. And if we're looking at cutbacks of up to or more than $1 billion, what are we going to be saying to our constituents? I mean, I'm already getting phone calls and meeting requests and letters and emails from folks who know they're going to be impacted by different parts of the budget reductions. I don't know what it's going to be. What's it going to be? Healthcare reductions of 6 or 7%? Is it going to be K through 12 education reductions? And if we can't say to those constituents, we took a hit ourselves in the legislative budget, we have to stand before them and say, well, we just pretty much left things alone, and even in some areas we increased spending. We decided we couldn't put all that off for future years, like we're going to be asking you in the education world or in the healthcare world to do that and to pass up on good expenditures and good ideas, put them off till future years when we haven't been willing to do that ourselves. I don't want to be in that position. I don't think any of us want to be in that position. I think we want to be able to say to our constituents, we were responsible in the legislative budget. We saw 6-7% overall spending reductions in the general fund, and we at the legislative level, we took at least a 4% or a 5% reduction as the senator from Greeley is proposing. That's the kind of responsible governance I believe the taxpayers, the citizens of this state are looking for this year. You know, if you look at government spending overall, at all levels of government, you know, we're over 36% of the economy now. Federal, state, that doesn't even include a lot of the local government expenditures. So we're approaching 40% of the annual wealth of this country being consumed by government. And I think people expect us to live within our means. You know, I've heard a lot of talk about how, well, this is all a result of Tabor, this horrible Tabor that we all have to live under. Well, that's just simply not true, because what Tabor is a mechanism that the taxpayers, the voters of this state, put in place in 1992 and have kept in place year after year to basically say, you can grow government, you can take those tax revenues up as much as the growth in the population and the growth in CPI, inflation. You can grow at that level, but we don't want you to keep growing indefinitely. You look at other states. We are very fortunate in Colorado. I talk to people around the country. We are the envy of other states, quite frankly, that we have a mechanism in our state constitution. They say, well, how could we get that in our state? Where the taxpayers, the voters have said, you can only grow government as much as population and inflation. Government has to live within its means. And you look at other states, whether it's California, Illinois, New York, and the continual budget crisis they have, the deficits they run, the amount of money they have to move around and try to raise from all kinds of sources. And in Colorado, we're always expected here to live within a reasonable budget. And the reality is we got a lot of extra money during the pandemic. We got a lot of extra money during COVID from the federal government, trillions and trillions of dollars of taxpayer dollars and really national debt given to the states to spend. And so we spent it. And we should have recognized at the time that that was a temporary situation. And now the chickens have come home to roost, and we have to face the reality that we can't have all of these FTEs and all of these programs. We can't indefinitely spend that money. It's time to live within our means. It's time to recognize in this particular legislative budget, we can live on $72 million. And we can say to our constituents, to the voters, we recognize this is a difficult year for our state, for our taxpayers, and we're going to take the same sort of budget hit that we're expecting all the rest of the state government to take. So I think this is an excellent amendment, and I look forward to many more of these type of amendments from the good senator from Greeley, because we're going to have to, in the next 6 weeks, we're going to have to deal with a very difficult budget situation. And if we can't say we took our hits just like everybody else, I think our constituents are going to be very disappointed in us. So I ask my colleagues to support this amendment.
Senator Rich, to the amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly appreciate the good senator from Weld County, I guess it's Brighton, bringing the amendment L007. I used to be in local government, and I remember a time when things got really tough and we had to make some serious cuts. Maybe not on the same scale as what we're facing, but every department, whether you were an elected or a department head, had to come up with 10% cut. And we had like 2 weeks to get it done. And we had to show some real leadership on doing that, as painful as it was. It was the right thing to do. It was a good example to set to our constituents, that we understood that we had to be responsible for hard times, just like you have to whenever you're around your kitchen table and talking to your family. So I really appreciate this amendment. When the good senator from, let's see, well, the previous speaker was talking about the spending of the furniture. I was thinking about that, and I thought, they want that so badly that, like for myself, I have my own furniture. They want me to get rid of my furniture to use that new furniture. That's how badly they want to spend this money. And that is not setting a good example. We need to be more responsible. We need to provide leadership. And I urge an aye vote on L007.
Senator Pelton, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in full support of this amendment. When I was county commissioner, there was one year our general fund dropped 15%. We had to cut everything. And we survived. We trimmed out some fat. We did some good business. And at the end of the day, when things got better, we could kind of fill in the things we had to delay. So this amendment really speaks to that kind of a situation, and I think we get down the road a little ways, then we can start to fill in the gaps that we need to cut right now. You know, we're not immune from a budget crunch. We need to participate just like every other department needs to. So I support this amendment.
Senator Simpson, to the amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of Amendment L007. It's almost ironic. This morning there were a dozen representatives in my office from FQHCs across my district, and their number one plea for me was, don't cut our Medicaid funding. It was hard to face them and talk about what we were going to debate this morning, a 1% increase in our legislative budget, when they are faced with potential cuts, and the good senator from Brighton touched on this morning about, you know, if we don't increase Medicaid reimbursement rates or only offer a 1% increase and inflation is at 3%, that's a cut to Medicaid. Those FQHCs in my district serve, you know, up to more than 35%, in some instances 40% of my constituents. And how they deal with having to reduce their services has great impact on my community. We're asking, as presented, for a 1% increase. The amendment actually puts us more in line with what we should be facing. As I'll say, the proverbial free-range chickens have come home to roost. We have reached that point. These discussions are going to get intense over the next several weeks. This is like a prelude to what's about to come, and the challenges we have about facing reality and limited growth in government and picking and choosing and setting priorities. This wouldn't rise to one of my top priorities for this year. Much like the good senator from Brighton, fully funding K through 12 education, supporting higher education, and those most needy in our communities, particularly those that are Medicaid dependent, really rise to the top of my priority list. It's with that, Mr. Chair, I offer my full support for Amendment L007. Thank you.
Minority Leader Lundin to the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of Amendment 7 to the Legislative Appropriations Bill. Colleagues, let me start by saying that the team, the nonpartisan staff, the folks that we fund with this money, in part, it also pays our salaries and other things, but the team that does the work is the best among the 50 states and commonwealths in America. There is no better legislative team. Think about the folks who do our economic analysis, the folks who provide our legal support, the folks who, frankly, make this building, or at least the second floor of this building, function so well. They are unparalleled. So this isn't about a challenge for them. This is not about, we need to cut you because you're not quite getting it done. It's the opposite of that. They're brilliant, and I'm so grateful for them. This is about a conversation that falls directly on the shoulders of the legislators, 35 members of the Senate, 65 members of the House. We have a budget problem this year, and we're asking everyone in Colorado to be prepared to tighten their belts. We've got to tighten our belt first so that we have, and the phrase that I would use is the moral authority to make those very, very difficult requests. Now, I'm a step ahead of most of you. Since I serve on the executive committee, I have already cast an incredibly uncomfortable vote. I voted no on this budget writ large. In a small room, face to face, eyeball to eyeball, breath to breath, with the very people whose budget I'm seeking to cut. And yet, I think it falls to us to carry the mantle that you all are proud to have someone point at you and say, she's a leader. He's a leader. What do leaders do? They take the hit first. What do leaders do? When their team is taken care of, then they take care of themselves. We have to demonstrate moral authority over the budget and the incredibly difficult challenges we're going to ask so many people to take. We've got to take the cut first. That's what this amendment is. That's why I support this amendment. And it's not a meat cleaver amendment. It's a scalpel amendment. It says, let's make this small, appropriately sized, although painful. Whenever you get cut, it hurts. Let's make this scalpel-like cut. Let's demonstrate leadership. Let's start by supporting amendment number 7. Colleagues, I encourage you to think about it seriously, join in the effort to demonstrate leadership in a bold way that no one can deny. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. President, to the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the good senator from Brighton for her amendment and also for sharing her amendments in advance. I really appreciate it. And I want to say thank you to the good senator from Monument as well, as we looked eyeball to eyeball, breath to breath. I feel uncomfortable saying that. As we had a vote in executive committee, members, if you happen to have access to the legislative department budget package and appropriations bill narrative on page 3, this has been referenced, but overall executive committee approved a 7.9% cut across the board to our departments, or overall across the board. When I look at L007, what concerns me is that the primary cut is to the legislative department. This is actually not specific to the legislative cash fund. And I appreciate the good senator's amendment because if you look at it down the line, Ledge Council, State Auditor, OLLS, JBC, proposes a 5%, additional 5% cut across the board and reduces legislative appropriation by $3.5 million. So to be clear, I know there's conversations regarding the legislative cash fund, but this legislative department fund cut will significantly impact our lawyers, our drafters, folks who help us do our work every single day in this building. And to the point of some of the cuts that have already been made, just a couple to name. In our decision in executive committee, we've already made cuts, employee salaries by $271,000, eliminated funding for special sessions, $475,000, reduced operating and travel budgets across the branch, $742,000, just to name a few in terms of some of those cuts that have been made. So again, L007 specifically talks to cuts to legislative department. We've made significant cuts already, and we want to make sure that, while I know, as it was said by the good senator from Monument, we really appreciate all the work that folks do in this building. This is not a comment on how we feel about them, but in executive committee, we've had these conversations, we've made cuts, and our hope is to be able to continue to support our staff, to support us in the work that we do. Again, I ask for a no vote on L007.
Mr. Minority Leader, to the amendment.
Thank you very much. Want to be really precise in trying to break this down, and I think the best way to bring clarity to this conversation around a cut that is a meaningful cut is to think about cash on cash, year over year general fund money. And this is where you can tell, are we cutting or not? If you flip to page 9 in your budget, you can see that general fund, year over year, we are in fact increasing our budget by 0.9% or almost 1%. So that is, yes, is there cash that's been accumulating over here, and then when we move this money to that money, and the other money becomes new money, and the old money becomes intermediary money, and the intermediary money becomes today's money? Yeah, we can say we're making a cut, but how do you check that all out? You go to cash on cash, year over year, general fund, and you can see we're not making a cut. And that's why this amendment is important, because that would move us into the space where we're actually making a cut. We're about, the amendment, I think, probably gives us to about a 2.5% cash cut, but we could work through the numbers of that. My point is, when you look at it with crystal clarity, you needed this amendment or something like it to actually demonstrate leadership that is a cut to general fund year over year.
Senator Kirkmire, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, members, I would just direct you to page 2 on your legislative budget package. And you'll notice in there where it talks about the net impact on the general fund includes a recommended transfer from the legislative department cash fund of $4.3 million. That $4.3 million, which they're trying to make it look like it's a cut, that $4.3 million is for furniture out of the legislative department cash fund. And then if you look on page 3, you'll see where the cuts are. Because the good senator from Denver is correct. There are some decreases here, but there are cuts to, and look in the middle of the page, the long bill recommendations for the Blue Book and property tax study. It's done. That cut didn't hurt at all. It's over. We don't need to appropriate $2.4 million for that because we don't need to do that anymore. Oh, and then they're suspending the interim activities, so that's another $300,000. So there's no hurt there. We're not cutting FTE. In fact, we're increasing FTE. So now I want to direct you to page 9. And here's how you read a legislative budget. You look at the top of page 9, you look at the 24-25 appropriations. That is the amount of money that was appropriated for this current fiscal year. $74,527,093, of which $72,723,741 is general fund, ongoing general fund expenditures. And look all the way over to the right. I know that might be difficult for some, but look to the right. 450.4 FTE. Now go to the bottom. Go to the bottom of the page. And you see that in bold where it says total, it's the third line up. Total fiscal year 25-26 request. General fund, $73,381,194. Now, I don't even need to figure out the math, and neither do you, because we put it right here in the budget request. It's right here on this page. That is a $657,453 increase from last year's appropriation. Increase from last year's appropriation of approximately 1%. And then go over and look at the FTE line. Do you see a decrease in FTE? Because I don't. We're going to go from 450.4 to 451.8. There was an amendment in appropriations, so it's actually going to be 451.5. That would be an increase of an FTE. We're not cutting any staff here. We're increasing. We are increasing. Now, I went to the legislative meeting, which I'll probably never ever be able to go back to again, because I was the only one who asked questions in a meeting that they thought was only going to take 15 minutes, took well over an hour. But gosh, the information I received there. We have a legislative department cash fund. It's not cash, people, it's general fund. We have a legislative department cash fund made up of general fund that we have not used in our appropriation year over year over year over year. In fact, since 2012, we have rolled over general fund money into a legislative department fund, $54 million. Last year, when we had a general fund appropriation of $72.7 million, we did not spend $5.5 million of it. Last year, we appropriated almost $73 million last year to the legislative branch, and they didn't spend $5.5 million. So asking to reduce our budget by $3.5 million is not a sacrifice. It's not going to take away from us funding our legislative council staff. It's not going to take away from funding the Office of Legislative Legal Services. Because I divided this up in a proportional share. Whatever proportion of that $5.5 million each of these offices didn't use last year is the same proportion that they will take of a $3.5 million cut, a decrease in our budget. They didn't spend money last year that they were appropriated. So there is no sacrifice here. There is no, we're going to have to lay anybody off here. There is no, gosh, we won't be able to get the things done that we need to have done in our legislative branch. Not accurate. You need to look at the budget document on page 9. Tells you exactly what's going on. A 1% increase. A 1% increase to a budgeted amount that we didn't need, what, 5.5 of 72, 73 million? What is that, about 6%? That we didn't need 6% of last year. This $3.5 million decrease in our budget for the legislative branch effectively becomes a 4% decrease overall. At a time when we are in a structural deficit. This isn't a tighten your belt kind of year. We have known about the structural deficit. Certainly the Joint Budget Committee, not the one I was on, but in 2021, my first year, was told in March of 2021, we were in a structural deficit and it was getting worse. We need to stop overspending. And $3.5 million, it's what I need for early intervention. It's what we need for those kids that have severe disabilities. That the governor's office of early childhood decided to try and cut their contracts before the end of the year and affect their resources and their services. $3.5 million bucks. This is not a sacrifice. This is us demonstrating a moral decision. We didn't need it last year. We don't need it this coming year. In fact, we didn't need it the year before, or the year before, or the year before, all the way back to 2012. We didn't need it. We don't need it in the capital renovation fund. We don't need to be spending for capital renovation when we budget for capital renovation. This is not a sacrifice. I urge an aye vote on Amendment 7, and I ask for a division. I'm sorry. Didn't know you were going to speak again.
Mr. President, to the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just to the point of clarification, if you look at page 2, again, of your legislative department budget package, at the bottom last point on number 3 says a $4.3 million transfer from the legislative department cash fund to the general fund. This was to shore up our budget shortfall. If you look at page 3 on table 1, there's an area that says plus placeholders for proposed transfers to general fund, recommended transfer from the legislative department cash fund. I just wanted to clarify in speaking with staff that is not for furniture. And I renew my motion for a no vote on this amendment.
Seeing no further discussion, a division has been requested. All those in the chamber not entitled to vote, please be seated. Okay. The motion is the passage of Amendment L007. All those in favor, please stand. Thank you. Please be seated. All those opposed, please stand. The motion for the adoption of Amendment L007 is lost. To the bill. Senator Kirkmire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment at the Department Cash Fund. This amendment would transfer of the $22 million, that would be $22 million that is sitting in that cash fund, that it would transfer $21.6 million approximately. Oh, thank you. We've had a total of $54 million come into this fund that, quite frankly, when I was in the legislative committee, pretty much nobody really knew about. Now, I'm not saying nobody knows about it or that they haven't seen it, but I will tell you as a member of the Joint Budget Committee, I didn't know we had this legislative department cash fund that was all general fund money. In fact, I could probably tell you of the over 1,000 cash funds that we have and how much general fund they have in those cash funds. But I will tell you when I'm sitting there and I'm asking a pretty direct question about, is there general fund? Where does that cash fund come from? Is that general fund? Does it originate from there? And I have to wait 3 minutes before I get a response that basically tells me, yes, it's all general fund. So what we do is, this year, apparently, we're going to appropriate to the legislative branch $73.4 million. And whatever they don't spend of that $73.4 million is going to go and roll right on into a legislative department fund. So again, all general fund money. It's going to roll into this fund, and it's going to just sit there because there's projected to be a remaining balance of $11.6 million. And maybe you're asking, so of the $22 million or so that's in this fund, what are they going to spend it all on? Well, there's stuff like the legislative appropriations bill, proposed transfer to the general fund. That's great. We should be transferring all of it, as this amendment says. Here's the real topper. $4 million for annex furniture, top range of estimates. We think we need to spend $4 million on furniture in a year when we have a structural deficit. In a year where the governor's proposed budget cut $3 million from rural health care, is cutting a total of $57 million from Medicaid, the governor's budget request. $57 million from Medicaid. It's not the federal government that's cutting Medicaid. It's Colorado state government that's looking to cut Medicaid. That is directly to providers. In a year, when we get a budget request from the governor that cuts $3 million from core services and child welfare, that would be for kids who are neglected and abused. In a year where we are $23.5 million short for those same children in child welfare to provide services for kids that are neglected and abused. In a year where we are $24 million short to provide for childcare for low-income families. Last week, at the Joint Budget Committee, we had to have an emergency meeting because the Governor's Office of the Department of Early Childhood stopped contracts with providers that provide early intervention resources for kids with severe disabilities. It was about a $3 million cut, $3 to $4 million cut. Yet over in the legislative branch, we put in our budget to fund $4 million worth of furniture. There's no reason, there's absolutely no reason that we should be sitting on $22 million of general fund money in a fund balance that we're expecting to spend $4 million for furniture, when we are looking at making cuts to Medicaid, making cuts towards neglected and abused kids, child care for low-income families, children with severe disabilities, and that's just the top of the list. There is no reason why we need $4 million of new furniture. There's absolutely no reason why we should be saying that we need this legislative cash fund for capital renovations. We budget to the capital renovation fund. There is absolutely no reason to have a legislative department cash fund balance, a general fund balance. Sure. Am I grateful that the executive committee thought it was a good idea out of the $22 million to propose a transfer to the general fund of $4.3 million? Yeah. I think they're about $15.7 million short or more. There's no reason we're sitting on a remaining balance, even after all of this spending of nice to haves versus need to have. There's no reason we would sit on an $11.6 million fund balance. That's outrageous to me. When I am sitting there faced with people who are asking me not to cut children with severe disabilities, don't cut those programs. When I get a request from the governor's office that says, you know what, we need to cut money to those evaluations and assessments for kids with autism. There is a moral ground that we should be standing on here. This is not a political decision. This should not be a hard decision. This is a moral decision. Furniture over families. Really? Is that what we want to be known as? Furniture over families? Sitting on a fund balance? $22 million approximately in this fund. And seriously? I'm supposed to be at the JBC trying to put a budget together that could cut Medicaid, cut funding to neglected and abused kids, cut funding to child care for low-income families? And we're going to sit on this balance, and on top of it all, we're going to buy furniture? Move your furniture with you. You got to move into another building? Take your furniture now. Take the furniture that you have now. We don't need new furniture. That is wasteful in my mind. When I am sitting there looking at having to make cuts to people with disabilities. You know, I know you're not getting all these emails, but I'm certainly getting them all, and I think my JBC colleagues are getting them as well. I probably got 350 emails over the weekend And I would say half of them had pictures in them of children whose services were going to be cut. It's heartbreaking. And we're going to buy furniture? This Amendment 6 says, no, we're going to be responsible. We're going to put those kids over somebody's need for new furniture. We're going to put those low-income families who are on Medicaid. And we're talking about cutting provider rates for people who are at 138% of the federal poverty level. And for those of you who missed it, I told you earlier, for a family of 4, 138% of poverty level means they're making less than $45,000 a year, combined incomes. This should be an easy one for us. I hope it's an easy one for us. This is, you know what, maybe you need to do a gut check. We're doing gut checks every day at the Joint Budget Committee. This body needs to do a gut check. What is your priority? Is it furniture? Or is it those kids? Or is it those people who need to get those medical and behavior health services that are on Medicaid? I'm not talking about the expanded population in Medicaid either. I'm talking about the poorest of the poor in our state. Seriously, do we think we should be buying new furniture? We need to start thinking what parents and families are thinking when they're looking at their budgets, when they're looking at their paychecks and trying to figure out, how am I going to take my kid to the dentist? How am I going to get those services for my child and take them to the doctor? How do I get my daughter or son to the speech pathologist? They don't turn around and say, Guy, hey, let's go buy a new dining room table. That's not what hardworking families do. They don't have the money to take their kid to medical or behavioral health services that they need for their child. They don't say, oh, well, I think I'll go buy new living room furniture. They don't do that. We should not either. We need to be thinking the same way our constituents are thinking when they're putting together their budgets. We've increased expenditures. We, here at the General Assembly, we've increased to the point where we're unaffordable in this state. Fees, additional taxes, insurance, health insurance went up by 5 to 7%. Property taxes, because of things that started here, went up. Homeowners insurance goes up. Everything has gone up. The cost of living has increased substantially. Yet, I guess we think it's time to go buy new furniture. We don't need new furniture. We don't need to have a legislative cash fund that it's hard for us unless we go digging. And I'm on the Joint Budget Committee, and I had to go dig for this. Unless we go digging, we know how these funds are being spent. It's gut check time. It's time for you to say, we're going to put the people of the state of Colorado first. We're going to put kids who are neglected and abused, we're going to put them first. They're in child welfare services, not at any fault of their own. We're going to make sure that low-income families, that yeah, we can at least try to serve 10% of the people who are eligible for child care, for CCAP, and not cut it. We're going to try and fund them so that low-income families who are going out, trying to make a decent living, trying not to just survive, but to thrive in this state, know that they have a safe location for their child to be in childcare. And we need to say to those who are very poor, who are less fortunate than us, that we're not going to cut their Medicaid because we need new furniture, because we need to sit on a balance of general fund money. Just sit on it over here. While at the same time, your joint budget committee members are asking every other department, every other elected official's office, every other branch of government to make cuts. But not us. Not us. We're not going to make any cuts. And then on top of it all, we're going to sit on a fund balance of general fund money and go buy new furniture. That is immoral. And it's just wrong. So I'm asking you to vote for Amendment 6, which would say we're taking this fund balance, we're going to put it in the general fund, and you're going to give us some opportunity at the Joint Budget Committee to make sure that we cover those things that I just talked about, because those are the priorities. New furniture is not a priority. Funding those who have the least among us, who are the less fortunate than us, that's a priority. That is a priority. I ask for an aye vote on Amendment 6.
Senator Carson, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, or Mr. Chairman. And I do rise to support the amendment by the senator from Brighton. I believe I got it right this time. Once again, the good senator from Brighton has identified, I think, an excellent amendment that helps us to set priorities here, to make it clear that we've got to take the same sacrifices in the legislative branch. We've got to use some money that's available over here, move it, and we can set better priorities by doing that. It's going to be very difficult for all of us later this year to stand in front of constituents who are looking at 6-7% cuts, and we haven't done much of anything in the legislative branch. I think we've got to make reductions. We've got to look at things like the office furniture, look at savings there and other areas, and make some sacrifices on our own. So I'm happy to support this amendment once again.
Mr. Minority Leader, to the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of Amendment 6 to Senate Bill 188, Legislative Department Budget. If you flip to page 7 in your write-up on the project, you can follow along. The amendment is essentially requiring that excess reserves, as this amendment would define, and it would say anything more than $500,000 in reserve is excess, should be reverted back to the general fund. If you look, if you've got page 7 in front of you, you see we start out with a $25 million beginning fund balance, and then some revenues came in year to date through January, and then there's some expenditures. Then you get into several big sets: reserves set aside for ongoing projects, which leaves an unencumbered balance of $22 million, then reserves set aside in earmarked accounts, which then leaves about a $21.2 million balance, and then estimated costs for planned expenses, which include a number of projects. So that's an element of what's going on, but let's get to the bottom line. The bottom line we get to is, well, what's left after all of those projects? And this, I'm not even talking about taking the furniture away at this point. I'm allowing for the furniture in my perspective, and quite frankly, in the way that this particular amendment would allow. There's still $11.6 million left in that fund balance. And so the amendment says, okay, let's put $11 million, roughly, of that remaining balance after all the very thoughtful things, and if you turn to page 7 and look through it, it's very thoughtful. There's nothing willy-nilly about this. It's projected things that have been in plan for some period of time. The amendment says there's still $11.6 million left. Let's sweep that $11 million back into the general fund. So, for me, this amendment begs the bigger question. The little bit of research I've done on the subject says there are apparently about 1,000 cash accounts across the various states, departments, agencies, offices, et cetera, which grow. I mean, every year we create half a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen new offices, departments, and offices of state government. Well, there's cash funds sitting at all of them. Well, if there's $11 million, $11.6 million of additional cash funds sitting in each one of those, then we should take this amendment and not only attach it to Senate Bill 188, we ought to attach it to the long bill and sweep all of those funds, because the state of Colorado, in its desire to be responsible, has a 15% reserve out there, billions of dollars in reserve that we're holding in our effort to be responsible. Well, that 15% reserve, depending on who is arguing, is either excessive or wholly inadequate. Now, one of the places we can go to get a good advice is the credit rating agencies. When the state of Colorado floats a bond, when it interacts with the credit markets say, okay, based on everything we know, international finance, national finance, state by state, across the whole board, you need to have 15, 16, 17, I think is the number they're actually looking for us to have now, to have the best potential credit rating. Okay, that's a great conversation. So that reserve that we have, we hold, and potentially that reserve increases, we hold that collectively to address the challenges that we have within state government as we move from year to year, project to project, to address the very sorts of things this $11 million sitting here is for. It's there as additional money to be held in reserve for potential future projects. The amendment says, I have a better idea. We're holding 15% statewide. Let's sweep that. And then I would say, let's go find every other cash fund held by every other department, office, agency of state government and sweep those too. Because writing our budget, completing our budget, so that we can properly fund and fund to the constitutionally required levels public education, so that the shiny faces of tomorrow that are joining us on the floor here and watching this debate, that their public education is properly funded based on what the people of Colorado have required. Amendment 23 says inflation plus population goes to public education and make sure that the children of tomorrow, in fact, have an education today. So this amendment says sweep out that cash fund. I would say we should do it everywhere and count on, in fact, let's have a policy debate around, is 15% reserve enough? Maybe it should be 16%, maybe it should be 17%. But let's go root out, starting with our very own budget. It's always best to start at home. Let's go find all those places, and let's find out how much in aggregate is being held in reserve accounts of this nature. So, tough vote, challenging vote, principled vote, important vote. Amendment 6 says we start with our own house and we give back into the general fund. And we hold a reserve. It's not like we're cleaning it all out. You know, we want to keep a balance in our personal savings account. Well, if you've got a personal savings account, your spouse has a personal savings account, and the family's got a personal savings account, and you find yourself an economic challenge, maybe your personal savings account and your spouse's personal savings account should flow into the broader family savings account And that's essentially what this particular amendment is offering us an opportunity to do. Colleagues, I urge you to support Amendment L7 to Senate Bill 188.
Senator Frizzell to Amendment L6.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Amendment L6. So many of you know that I have had the opportunity to sit on the Legislative Audit Committee for several years now, and it's a great committee. My predecessor, Senator Smallwood, who also sat on the committee, told me it was like the best committee. I don't know if I'd say that, but it's a really good committee. One of the things that we have the opportunity to do is review audits. And last year we had an audit around cash funds. Cash funds with uncommitted reserves exceeding what is called for in statute. And so you may or may not be aware, and I think this is an important piece of information, that in 1998, the General Assembly said, departments, you can't have an unlimited amount of reserve that you're sitting on. So you can have reserves, but you cannot, but we are going to limit what that looks like. I'm not sure, there are people in this room who probably know exactly why that happened, but back in 1998, I'm guessing that there was a really solid reason why the legislature decided to limit the amount of cash funds that a department could sit on, but that's the thing. And so this particular audit talked about I think there were 11 state departments that have been exceeding, sometimes for years and years. There is one department, Department of Public Health and Environment, that has 16 years where they have not been compliant with one of their cash funds. They have many, many. This was just one. And it's not a huge amount. But when you add up department after department sitting on cash funds that they're really not supposed to be sitting on, the total was, sorry, I'm looking for the final amount. I believe it was in the 25.4 million. So 11 departments, 19 total cash funds had excess uncommitted reserves totaling approximately $25.4 million. What could we do with $25.4 million to help the people of Colorado rather than just sitting on those funds? I can think of a few things, and I'm guessing the people who have been sending me email after email after email, I'm thinking that they can think of some really good ways for us to spend that money to benefit the people of Colorado, which is what we're supposed to be doing here. We should be prioritizing the people of Colorado, certainly over furniture. I know that the response to this particular amendment, Amendment L006, that we should all be voting for, the response is going to be, we need those reserves. We need that $22 million. Because in fact, the maximum reserve for the Department of the Legislature is close to $30 million. I believe that that's the number that I was given. We didn't hit that. So the Department of the Legislature did not make this list of 11 departments and 9 cash funds. The uncommitted cash reserve was only about $12 million. They didn't have to get a waiver from the Joint Budget Committee. They were able to just kind of continue business as usual, rolling excess funds into the cash fund. I would argue, members, I would argue, and I hope you will think about this, that we are at a point where sitting on a cash fund is not the best way to use taxpayer dollars, because after all, that's whose money this is, right? Just to remind us all, whose money is it? It's not my money. It's not your money. This is money that belongs rightfully to the citizens of the state of Colorado, who we were sent here to serve. This is making sure that those who are most at risk in our state have what they need. Those little kids, those kiddos who didn't pick to be born with an intellectual or developmental disability. They didn't pick that. They didn't choose that. They deserve to have early intervention because that can make a huge difference in their lives. Furniture is not going to make a difference in their lives. It's just not. They don't care if Lisa Frizzell has a spanking new desk. And candidly, I don't either. Keep your desk. These are times that require us to dig deep and make hard decisions. That's why we're here. That's why we were sent here. We were sent here to make hard decisions and to serve. Members, let's break the piggy bank for the Department of the Legislature and give the money where it needs to be spent. I urge an aye vote on L006. Thank you.
Mr. President, to the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Members, want to direct you, and I think you've already been looking at page 7, Table 2, Legislative Department Cash Fund balance of the book we've been discussing this morning. A couple of things. I want to say that as you look at the overall funding balance, you'll see reserves set aside for ongoing projects. You'll see the unencumbered fund balance, reserves set aside in earmarked accounts. But then you'll see the area that I think is the point of contention, and that is the unreserved fund balance and what we are looking to spend that money with, as well as the remaining balance. What I will say is that when you look at the estimated cost for planned expenses, these are estimates and these are not line items. I think that's really important to understand. I've been advised that transferring back more than what we've planned is a potential long bill discussion, and I will commit that I am open to having that conversation. I will also say, too, that I'm open to continuing the conversation on the funding being transferred. In addition to that, to be clear, when you look at these planned expenses, these estimated costs for planned expenses, this is money for the furniture that we've been talking about. Is not an appropriation in this bill. Again, these are proposals. These are not appropriations. So we're talking about two things. One was furniture that I've addressed. That's not an appropriation in this bill. Two is something that I think is really important for us to discuss, which is what this cash fund is ultimately about. So this amendment specifically reduces the cash fund to $500,000. And I would say that as we look at this cash fund, what it is funded over time. It is funded renovations in the Senate chamber, which include the flooring and cleaning under the floors, also making our chamber more ADA accessible, which quite frankly, given all of the, God bless you, given all of the changes that have already been made, I think that we have room for significant improvements in ADA compliance. Also, funding is being used for technology purchases for senators, signage, upgrading video equipment in our chamber, studies and services to address workplace relations, needs for the Colorado Channel, the expenditures authorized by the Capitol Building Advisory Committee. And I want to specifically point out a COVID response. House Bill 2013-45 diverted $1.2 million of the fiscal year 2019-20 reversion away from the cash fund into the general fund to address the budget shortfall during the pandemic. And I know we've already touched on that. So just to reiterate, this estimated cost for planned expenses is not an appropriation. It's a proposal. We're not voting on $4 million going towards furniture today, number one. Number two, we cannot accept this amendment because of the amount that it reduces our cash fund to in case we do need funds, which is why we have this legislative cash fund for many of the important things that were just mentioned. And then the last thing I'll share again is just my commitment. I really appreciate this amendment from the good senator from Brighton, and that we do need to look at, again, the remaining balance that we have here, this $11.6 million, and whether or not we can revert some of those funds back to the general fund in a time when we genuinely need those resources for everybody here in the state of Colorado. But this reducing the cash fund down to $500,000, I would ask a no vote.
Senator Kirkmire to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would just direct everybody back to page 7. It's $22,066,000 in an unencumbered fund balance. So we haven't spent all the money yet, but once this budget gets approved, they will be able to go and spend $857,000 on earmarked accounts for iPads and computers, Capitol Channel, the Capitol Building Advisory Committee account, televisions, and Mr. Brown's addict account. And then they want to spend, they meaning the executive committee wants to spend an estimated cost for planned expenditures about another $9.6 million, of which $4.3 million they're saying should transfer to the general fund. That's great. It should transfer to the general fund. All of it should transfer to the general fund. You know, in other departments and other branches, we tell them they have to give us a budget and tell us what they're going to spend the money on. We don't say, go put it in a cash fund and then don't tell us about it anymore. We don't do that. We dig in. And we tell everybody you have to come in with planned, budgeted expenditures. We don't let you just have a cash fund or a fund sitting around that says, oh, we'll spend it however we want. That's not how budgeting works. And as far as improvements to the Capitol itself, again, we have a Capitol complex renovation cash funds that is general fund money that we appropriate to make improvements in this building. And they are planned and budgeted for. And that's where improvements to this building should come out of. So if you want to make improvements to things that are developed, that are considered capital, like the Capitol ground renovation floor plan or whatever, then go to that committee and plan appropriately and everybody budget for it. So again, these are funds that get rolled over. They're general fund money. We're in a structural deficit. We're asking every department, both branches, other elected officials to come in with cuts to their budget. We haven't cut the budget from last year's appropriation. You voted against the amendment to cut the budget for this year. We need to make cuts. We need to set an example. And we are looking to fund close to $4 million worth of furniture out of a cash fund that is actually all general fund. When we're in a tight situation and we're cutting other things that are not nice to haves, but they are absolutely need to haves. I ask for an aye vote on Amendment 6.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the committee is the adoption of Amendment L006. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. Amendment L006 fails. Senator Kirkmire. There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L008?
Amendment L008, amend printed bill, page 4.
Senator
after
Kirkmire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L008.
That is a proper motion to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What this amendment does is there says basically no more reverting money, rolling money over into a cash fund. So when you ask for a budgeted amount, you should know what you're spending it on. We shouldn't be over budgeting. We shouldn't be over appropriating. What this is saying, no more. No more do we over budget $5.5 million in 1 year that then gets rolled into a cash fund that then gets decided on by a group of in our executive committee of where those funds go. You need to start telling us what you're budgeting all your money for and plan on it and stop thinking that you have this additional little fund that you can go plan for and make other expenditures out of. So again, this just says no more reversions into a cash fund. I ask for an aye vote on Amendment 8.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L008? President Coleman to the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you to the good senator from Brighton for her amendment. Again, I would ask for a no vote on this amendment. Members, ultimately, as it was said, this removes reversions to the cash fund in a bill that we passed years ago, House Bill 12-1301, reverted all unspent general fund appropriations to legislative branch cash fund at the end of each fiscal year. Just so that everybody knows, when this bill was passed in 2012, the House voted on this 63-0. It was unanimous. So again, something that we all supported, as well as the Senate voted 34-0, was also unanimous, and completely understand the time that we're in. May be different than that particular year, but when it comes to reversions being completely eliminated moving forward, it would eliminate our ability to be able to take care of all the things that I mentioned a few minutes ago. Don't want to restate all of those things, but we appreciate the work that has been done through the Legislative Cash Fund, especially in times of need, to make our chambers safe as well as accessible, as well as very productive for us to get the work done for the people of Colorado. I ask for a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the passage of Amendment L008. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have it, and Amendment L008 is adopted. Senator Winter, there is an amendment at the desk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L011.
1 sec, Senator Winter, please. We'll be in a brief senatorial 5. Committee will come back to order. Make a correction. On Amendment L008, we said that the noes have it. Amendment L008 fails, for the record. Will the clerk please read Amendment L011?
Amendment L011, amend printed bill, page 4 after.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L011 to Senate Bill 188.
That is a proper motion to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a reduction of $1 million from the Legislative Department cash fund to the general fund. And you might be asking where this number came from, and doing a little bit of research. Essentially, this is the cost of 35 offices of furniture. So this is the 35 of us saying, we don't need new furniture. We are serving the people. We are protecting teachers and Medicaid to the best of our ability, but this also isn't completely draining the cash fund. on what we might need for security purpose, accessibility purpose. We're making sure we're protecting our staff who are moving office, which is going to be a Herculean effort. They are all professionals. They work incredibly hard to make our ideas and our constituents' ideas actually come to fruition on bill paper and make a difference. And so this keeps them whole. It respects the work that they do. And this is the 35 of us saying we don't need new furniture. And I encourage yes vote.
Mr. President, to the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the good senator from Westminster. Members, I really appreciate this amendment. I'm asking for a yes vote on L11. I really am grateful for the conversation that we've had today. I think it is a challenge for all of us to ask for funding for anything outside of what we believe is going to be a benefit to the public. And so we've had that conversation regarding the folks in the state of Colorado. I would support this amendment because personally I don't necessarily need new furniture. I think there's a lot of things that we don't necessarily have in the building in order maybe to do our jobs more effectively. But when it comes to the 35 members, this is one of the things that I think we can accept. I am especially concerned about making sure that we have the funding for staff and folks that are moving potentially across the street where there is no furniture. As we're talking about all of us coming into the building, I think it's important that we acknowledge others and the importance of what they need before ours so we can focus on, they can focus on supporting us in our work. So I ask for an aye vote on L11.
Senator Kirkmire, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's a nice first start, but it still means that we're buying $3 million of furniture. And first of all, I'm not slated to get new furniture. And all 35 of us aren't slated to get new furniture. And my point was this. Everyone in every office right now has furniture. Everybody. I don't know why anyone needs new furniture. And if you want to use money in a fund balance for technology infrastructure, iPads, commuter refresh, Capitol ground floor stuff, displaying the Colorado Constitution in the Capitol, Mr. Brown's attic account, TVs for special session account, which we're not going to have special sessions apparently if you look at 199, Capitol Building Advisory Committee account, Capitol Channel account, more iPads. If you want money for that, then you should budget for it. And you should have asked for it in your legislative budget. So I'm just going to go right back to where I was before. We have a governor's request to cut $3 million from rural health care when we are in a state that has health care deserts, maternal health care deserts in 25 counties. We had a governor's budget request to cut $3 million from kids who are neglected and abused. And we know we are $23.5 million short in our funding for kids who are neglected and abused. We are $24 million short in our child care program for low-income families. $24 million short. The greatest barrier for people to be able to go to work is child care. It's child care. We're short. We are talking about in the early preschool program, because what I think is poor management, but there's been discussions at the JBC to cut the number of hours for the preschool program from 15 down to 10. I told you about the emergency meeting we had last week, where we are anywhere from $3 to $4 million short in this current fiscal year And the governor's Office of Early Childhood cut services, cut contracts, ended contracts to providers for early intervention programs that serve severely disabled people, children. And yesterday, we had a request from the governor's office in his budget request to cut $57 million of total funds, which included $13 million of general fund, to Medicaid providers. So that's to people who are at 138% of the federal poverty level. We don't need new furniture. So I would say vote for the amendment. It's a start, but no one should think that it means we aren't buying new furniture over all those families and those kids, because we are. It's a nice try, but it doesn't get us to where we need to get to. We are still putting families, we are still putting furniture over families. So this equates to me, I'm just going to give you my analogy. You got parents trying to figure out their budget and how they're going to fund taking their kids to the eye doctor or to the dentist. And they've got 2 kids. And they're saying, well, we'll make sure and get 1 kid to the eye doctor or to the dentist, but then we're still going to go buy living room furniture. That's how ridiculous this is to me. But hey, I would still encourage an aye vote on this amendment.
Seeing Mr. Minority Leader to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frequently in informal conversation, I rise in support of Amendment L011, Amendment 11. Frequently in informal conversations around politics, I tell my friends and colleagues that politics is a lot like improv. In improvisation, you always have to accept the suggestion. Yes, and here's what's wrong with that idea. So politics is very much like that. So I'm going to say, yes, I like Amendment 11. And it's semi-ironic in my mind that Amendment 11, if we ran it 11 times and added each one on top of the other, then I'd say that's what I've been talking about. That's what we need to be doing. We need to make an $11 million cut is what we need to be making. The amendment makes a $1 million cut. Now, I will tell you that I am being told in informal conversations that the crack staff, those people I was bragging on earlier, the folks who make the plans and run the nonpartisan operations, they're already figuring out how to turn that $4 million budget line item for furnishings into a $1.5 million budget. So the staff has already come up with 2.5 times this amendment, just doing their job well, which is what they do all the time. So I suggest acceptance of this, but then I think we probably, if we got to do this one amendment at a time, let's run it 11 more times and get to where we really responsibly should be. Now, the caution I would offer is this. If we think we can run this amendment and then tell the people of Colorado, yep, we took a cut. During the budget process, we actually made an additional cut. They will see through that in a New York minute. They know what's real and what's not. I mean, I'm grateful for this. I'll take it. But to think it addresses our budget problem in a meaningful way? Nah. That's not acceptable. So, all in, yes, and if I get any head nods that we can run it 11 more times, I'll go ahead and have those 11 additional amendments drafted. But I support Amendment 11 and ask that we right-size it by multiplying it by 11 to make it a meaningful addition to the budget challenges we have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the body is the adoption of Amendment L011. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Amendment L011 is adopted. To the bill. Senator Kirkmire.
Thank you, Mr.
There is an
Chair.
amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read Amendment L010?
Amendment L010, amend the Appropriations Committee report
Senator
dated.
Kirkmire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment 10.
That is a proper motion to the amendment. Senator Kirkmire to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What this amendment does, and this is a situation, and this is why we're in the budget problem that we're in now. I need you to go to page 60 of your book. You probably won't, but if you want to, you should go to page 60. R1. What R1 asked for in this budget is that they retain an FTE that was essentially funded one-time funding. When this FTE completed their work, they weren't supposed to be continuously appropriated, and they weren't supposed to continue on. This is the reason we're in the budget situation we're in, and we're in a structural deficit. Over the course of the last 6 years, and in particular over the course of the last 4 to 5, we funded things with one-time money. We funded them with federal funds, and we don't have those funds now. We funded them with one-time money. Things were supposed to just go for so long. They weren't supposed to continue on and on and on. The request that was in R1 is that they retain an FTE that was supposed to be used to write a report. The report was due December 1st, 2024. The report's done. And now they want general fund money to continue an ongoing FTE because apparently we need more people. While we're asking everybody else to cut, we're increasing. So again, this is the issue that's going on. This is why we find ourselves in a structural deficit. Because all those funds, a lot of them went to Behavioral Health Administration. A lot went to other places. We spent them. We put them in the health department. We put them in healthcare policy and finance. We put them in human services. We spent all those one-time funds, and then we changed them to ongoing general fund obligations. This is why we're in a structural deficit. This is a microcosm of the problem. So we had one FTE, supposed to be one-time funding. The report is in. We shouldn't be continuing it, yet here we are asking for an increase in the budget. $98,000 is approximately $100,000. This would represent a $100,000 cut to our budget and also the FTE cut, and we wouldn't be increasing. I ask for an aye vote on Amendment 10.
Mr. President, to the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Members, the good senator from Brighton and I both asked for an aye vote on this amendment. This is a great amendment because while we've had conversations today about areas we felt like we could not make cuts in, this is, again, an ongoing conversation that we will have. And I do agree that although there have been cuts made, we do need to make, wherever cuts can be made, we have to make those cuts in order to make sure we can provide funding in the areas that we know are the most important. And in conversation with the departments, we believe this is an area where we can make cuts but still be productive in our work. And I just wanted to stand here next to the good senator from Brighton, the way that the good senator from Denver, that Senator Barbara Kirkmire used to make it awkward as we stand here together in support of an amendment that we both agree on. And thank you very much. Thank you very much for your support.
Senator Kirkmire to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the good senator from Denver for saying yes to this amendment. Thanks.
It's Weld County, but it's bright.
Mr. Minority Leader, to the amendment.
Thank you very much. To Amendment 10. Colleagues, as I discussed on the cash fund amendment where we were talking about one cash fund of 1,000 cash funds, this amendment, which we have bipartisan support on, is, I think, a preview of coming attractions. This is going to repeat time and time again, I believe, as we look at the bigger long bill. This is an individual that ended up, it's the money that supports an individual that came into place with one-time money, and then we went out and hired somebody. And I think we've done that over and over and over again in state government over the last number of years where we made the mistake of using one-time money in a way that requires that it be two-time, three-time, four-time money. And this amendment cleans that up. I like the amendment. It's good. And we should do this every place we can find this repeated challenge when we get to the long bill debate. I urge your support for Amendment 10.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the body is the adoption of Amendment L010. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Amendment L010 is adopted. To the bill. The question before the body is the passage of Senate Bill 188. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 188 is adopted.